A camp on the edge of the Volga is flooded by the summer sun. The royal tent is surrounded by the tents of the warriors. Float in the wind a blue Khan's flag with images of the sun and moon and the guards' flags with Tangra's crosses. Attila and Orestes come out of the royal tent. Continuing their discussion, they headed for the shore. Listen, Orestes, I am very glad to be able to speak Latin and Greek with such an interesting interlocutor during my travel. One quickly forgets a foreign language without daily practice, and I spend more time traveling for state affairs than in our capital. Orestes admires the great river. I'm glad to leave Ravenna and find these great open spaces. The imperial palace stifled me. Intrigues, petty passions, corruption. Attila looks at him with approval and laughs. Sometimes we also have serious problems with princes. He resumed the serious air. The main Khan Urals and I decided that we could complete the preparatory reforms and proclaim the birth of the new Hun Empire. Attila shows with his hand a hamlet of some octagonal houses on the bank of the river. Here is a station, Yam, on the road from the Danube to the Urals. Around, we see a village composed of tents, yurts and vans. The travelers are resting, waiting for a ferry to cross the river. There are always traders, sometimes from distant countries. I organized many similar stations after my return from Italy. Of course, these are not paved Roman roads, but journeys for riders and chariots passing everywhere. We forgot many things after the fall of the First Hun Empire. Indeed, all this and many other things existed. For the rebirth of our empire we decided that there will be no mercenary Hun henceforth engaged in the Roman armies without the authorization of our central government. In the evening Attila and Orestes, accompanied by some officers, dine with the prince, chief of the local tribe. He is a man, old but always brave. The prince meets the distinguished guests followed by 7 young girls and 9 young people in fine costumes holding wooden cups filled with camise. He himself attaches the horse of Attila to the highest and most richly decorated pole. The dish of the day is sturgeon in all its forms, with broth, roasted, dried, salted and smoked. Of course, the Huns cannot do without meat. They also eat deer tongues, fresh cheese with round bread. In front of each guest there is a small plate filled with caviar. All men drink camise and wine from the Caucasus. The prince asks several questions to Orestes, who can already answer the simplest questions in Hun. Then old Hun says, "The passing of a Roman prince in the service of our young Khan testifies to the power of our great El. I think Attila will be the new Modin. I am 70 years old and I remember the time when the Huns still lived on the other side of the Volga. We were not threatened from the east because our eastern neighbors were the Hunnic tribes. But in the east the situation was very different. The Goths of King Hermaneric began their offensive, but it ended very badly for them." Attila explains. The Goths wanted to conquer the route to the gold of the Urals and the fur of Siberia. Hermaneric defeated several sedentary peoples from the Black Sea to the Baltic Sea. I always listen with interest to stories about this heroic era. It is also interesting for our Roman guest. The old prince relates with great pleasure. King Hermaneric was very severe with the conquered peoples. That is why the Roxolanes, who then lived on the banks of the Don, began negotiations with our Khans to escape the power of the Goths. Hermaneric, who was nearly 100 years old, learned of this plan and wished to arrest the chief of the Roxolanes. But this chief took refuge with us. Yet his wife Sunilde was arrested and quartered by 4 wild horses. This excessive vengeance has aroused great indignation in the steppes. The brothers of this innocent victim committed an assassination attempt and dangerously wounded Hermaneric. The god was no longer favorable to the Goths. We began to prepare ourselves for war and their vassal peoples for insurrection. One day, I participated with the other young warriors of our tribe in a great hunt. I was not far from the royal group. Suddenly we saw a beautiful doe with superb golden horns. The eyes of the Huns are inflamed with the account of the witness of this miraculous event. We understood that this fantastic animal was sent by Tangra himself, and all the army began to follow cautiously this doe. From time to time she turned her head to look at us. Then she approached a large marsh that separated our pastures from the territory of the Alans. And the miracle happened. The golden-horned doe has entered the waters and through an unknown ford has crossed this great marsh. We followed her and came out of the marsh near the camp of Alan's king. It was evident that Tangra ordered us to submit the Alans first, in order to crush the Goths with them. We captured Alan's king, who took an oath of fidelity to our Khan. Immediately afterwards, we attacked and easily defeated the Goths. King Hermaneric committed suicide. While listening attentively to this exciting story, Orestes eats with pleasure sturgeon. Then he starts eating caviar with a spoon. He was already eating caviar from the Loire, but not in such quantities. After his third spoon, he stops and smiles, in small quantity. The caviar is delicious, but I see that it is difficult to empty a plate. The conversation now revolves around common things. The prince said, "Now we have many meadows. The herds grow in fertile pastures. Before, many people were wearing a lot of skins. Today they have more beautiful clothes. Youth dreams of exploits and journeys in distant lands. Recently, they were excited by the information that the southern Huns are preparing an invasion in Bactria. Some want to participate." Attila explains, "Our borders end on the Aral Sea. Further on we have many allies. These tribes sometimes invite our princes to participate in their incursions into Iran and Bactria. It becomes authoritative. We will go to these countries one day. Not now. Today, the Romans demand more mercenaries than before. It is enough to occupy the most ardent young warriors. Enjoy peace. The Great War is never excluded. Then we will have to mobilize all our strengths. The prince comes alive. This is good news for our young people. But in the west there are too many forests and few convenient places for cavalry operations." The Khan agrees. "That's true, but Tangra sent you a golden-horned hind who took you to the west. We must do in the west what the Tabgatches did in the east." The prince objects, "But we are happy here, and would not want to leave the steppes like the Tabgatches for countries of miserable sedentaries." Attila explains patiently, "No one wants to force all Huns to settle in the Roman Empire. Only, the Roman cavalry could be composed mainly of Huns if we get their agreement. For that we will probably be obliged to make them first feel our power better." Orestes is tired. He is not yet used to riding several days almost without stopping and to sleep in the saddle. Their trip to the Volga was quiet. They slept in tents. Crossed the second capital city and some other cities where they enjoyed a real comfort but without excess. Attila explained to the princes and chiefs in a few words his ideas on the Pax Hunna Romana. The existence of the experience of the Tabgatches and the tens of thousands of Huns who had already been mercenaries among the Romans made his ideas easy to understand even to minds limited by everyday worries. The presence of Orestes, at the service of Attila, gave further proof of the possibility of realization of the ideas of the young Khan. Everyone understood that Attila only could direct the realization of this project. That is why even the most proud princes, equal in their opinion to their nobility in Attila, recognized that it was he who was chosen by Tangra as the creator of the new empire Hun. After the Volga, Attila decided to travel faster. He is eager to see a new high-quality weapons factory begin the hills of the pre-Urals. The detachment continues to follow the valley of a river with pure and cold water. Stop, command Attila, without descending from his mount. He invites Orestes to follow him. 2 horsemen on well-harnessed horses climb rapidly to a summit, high but not steep. On the open height there is only one tree decorated by the menus present of the innumerable travelers to the spirit of the mountain. Orestes contemplates the panorama of mountains, steppes and woods. He turns east and sees an ocean of forests. The wind changes direction and mixes the smell of the steppes with the smell of the taiga.